Karoline Leavitt believed she could speak her mind freely and face no consequences, but one remark directed at Jasmine Crockett sparked a legal storm that caused her whole career to collapse almost instantly. It was less than 15 minutes into the segment when the atmosphere shifted. The panel was airing live from Austin, Texas, broadcast nationwide, featuring a group of voices all experienced in politics, media, or law. Yet the tension was not coming from policy arguments or the usual talking points. Instead, it erupted the moment Karoline Leavitt leaned forward, a slight smirk forming at the corner of her lips, and said something that would haunt her reputation permanently. Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman representing Dallas, had just offered a calm but pointed comment about how race shapes expectations of leadership in Congress. She was not being accusatory, nor was she emotional. She simply explained the issue. There's an expectation to be palatable, especially for women like herself. If she spoke too bluntly, it was labeled aggressive. If she stayed too quiet, she was seen as unqualified. That tension, she said, is real. That is when Karoline cut in. Well, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, if some people would stop acting like victims and actually behave like leaders instead of running a victimhood campaign, we might see more respect in politics. There was a pause. Jasmine's brow tightened, but she did not say a word. The moderator cleared her throat. Karoline kept going. And honestly, Jasmine, people do not dismiss you because of your skin color, sorry, but because you behave as though the world owes you something. That is not leadership. That is entitlement. The moderator appeared stunned. A low murmur spread through the live audience, but Jasmine remained composed. I do not need anyone to owe me anything, Jasmine replied, her voice calm and firm. I serve my community. I speak firmly because I carry generations behind me, and if that makes people uneasy, good. Her voice stayed level, yet her words landed like thunder. What had started as a policy-focused discussion suddenly erupted into a heated clash live on air. Every second was being clipped, shared, and debated on Twitter. Hashtags were trending. In under an hour, TikTok users were already pairing the clip with historical moments showing similar coded language. Some labeled it a meltdown. Others claimed it was a mask finally slipping. Behind the scenes, producers were scrambling. The network's PR team rushed to prepare statements, while Karoline's own advisors messaged her urgently, begging her to retract, apologize, clarify anything. But Karoline did not view it as a blunder. When the cameras went to commercial, she stood up, shrugged, and said loud enough for the crew to hear, I said what everyone's thinking. She just did not like hearing it. She had no clue what she had just set in motion, what she considered blunt truth, millions perceived as deliberate humiliation. And Jasmine? She did not storm off. She did not withdraw. She stayed in her seat, adjusted her microphone, and waited calmly for the show to resume. Once back on air, she finished her remarks in the same steady, careful tone, no anger, no emotional outbursts, yet her silence in those first moments had already spoken louder than any words. People were not just reacting to the clash, they were analyzing it, peeling back the layers of coded language, tone, and context. Morning show pundits began describing it as a textbook example of modern gaslighting disguised as political debate. But something even bigger was underway. Jasmine's team had already begun collecting transcripts, video evidence, and legal notes. She knew this was not simply a rude comment, it was a deliberate attempt to damage her reputation, broadcast to millions. But the detail that made it impossible to brush aside emerged hours later, when a former staffer of Karoline leaked private messages revealing that this poke and provoke tactic had been planned ahead of time. By sunrise the next day, the video had surpassed 12 million views. It was everywhere: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram Reels, political discussion boards, podcasts, even cable news channels were looping it non-stop. But people were fixated not only on the words themselves, they focused on how Karoline looked while delivering them, confident, dismissive, even a bit proud. The stark contrast between her expression and Jasmine's quiet strength made it all the more striking. One woman leaned into the insult. The other held steady under its weight, A high school teacher in Memphis played the clip for her social studies class to spark a discussion. A pastor in St. Paul brought it up during his Sunday sermon. College students in Arizona printed quotes from the exchange and taped them on campus bulletin boards next to posters reading, "Words carry weight, so do consequences." Yet not everyone was outraged. Many of Karoline's supporters, especially from conservative media spaces, quickly stepped up to defend her. "She was just speaking the truth," said a talk show host in Tampa. "People are far too sensitive. If we cannot push back on race-based narratives, then what exactly are we doing in America anymore?" Others took a more careful approach, trying to shift how the moment was viewed. They claimed it was not racism, merely blunt honesty. They argued she had not said anything untrue. Why is it wrong to criticize people of color without instantly being labeled racist? They asked. But that angle did not work, not this time, because the video clip did not stand on its own. Within a few hours, journalists started digging up some of Karoline's past statements. A college speech from 2019, where she dismissed the idea of implicit bias. A podcast interview in 2021, where she joked about changing her speech patterns to fit in with white people's comfort. A now deleted tweet that described Congresswoman Crockett as aggressive with a touch of ghetto. Each revelation added more weight. Meanwhile, Jasmine had remained mostly quiet. She had posted only one tweet, right before midnight. "Words have power. So does silence. My team and I are looking at all options. Accountability matters." That one message was enough. It was shared thousands of times within minutes. Civil rights organizations released formal statements before dawn. High-profile lawyers tweeted out their support. Famous figures with millions of followers reposted Jasmine's clip, writing captions such as, "This is why we raise our voices," and "We stand with you." By midday, Jasmine was trending on 5 different social platforms. She had not gone searching for attention, but now, the spotlight was firmly on her. Her district office back in Dallas began receiving flowers, letters, and countless emails. One note, written by hand on lined notebook paper, read, "My daughter watched you speak and told me she wants to run for office one day. Thank you for staying calm when others tried to rattle you." But Jasmine's focus was not on the praise. She was thinking ahead about the presidency. "I am not doing this for social media views," she told her chief of staff, Samira, during a private meeting that afternoon. "This cannot only be about the moment. It has to stand for the bigger message." Samira nodded. "So we go legal?" Jasmine did not pause. "Yes, all the way." They were not naive. Targeting a prominent media personality carried serious risks. The right-wing media machine would accuse Jasmine of stifling free speech, calling her thin-skinned, overly emotional, and saying she was using race as a weapon. But Jasmine was unfazed. She was done with people thinking they could say anything they pleased under the shield of open debate and walk away untouched. "We need to stop acting like racial disrespect is simply part of public life," she told her legal advisor later. That same day, "It is not. Not for me. Not for the next generation watching us." By early evening, Jasmine's team made an official announcement. A lawsuit was being prepared, seeking $80 million in damages, both personal and professional. The amount was not random. It was calculated to attract news coverage, to ensure the case was taken seriously, but more than anything, to send a clear signal that there was a price for crossing certain lines. Some news outlets tried to minimize it, describing it as a daring move or political showmanship, but others took it seriously. The LA Times ran a front-page opinion piece titled, "The Cost of Silence in a Loud World." NPR broadcast a segment discussing coded language and how it impacts Black women in politics. The national conversation was shifting, and Jasmine found herself at the center of it. Yet, what nobody anticipated was how quickly Karoline's entire media empire would start to unravel once big corporate sponsors began weighing their options. The legal action hit like thunder. It was officially filed in Harris County, Texas, because Jasmine Crockett's legal team wanted the proceedings held on home ground, under scrutiny in a state familiar with high-profile court cases. The filing was 63 pages long and built solidly. It documented every word Karoline had spoken live on air, every resurfaced tweet, and every public statement she had made since. Nothing was left open to interpretation. The demand for $80 million was not just meant to generate headlines. It was detailed and specific: loss of professional credibility, damage to reputation, emotional distress, and the ongoing impact on Jasmine's ability to be recognized as an objective, capable leader. But even beyond financial harm, it was about the principle. And the team working on the case was serious. Leading it was attorney Brandon Keyes, a litigation expert from San Antonio known for his calm demeanor and sharp precision in court. People said he never raised his voice, yet held juries' full attention. With each word, Jasmine appreciated that about him. "I want facts, not rage," she had told him before he agreed to represent her. Brandon was intentional in his approach. He held a press conference on the steps outside the courthouse, with Jasmine and Samira standing beside him. His voice was steady and clear. "This is not about a political argument," he said. "This is about planned defamation and a public attack on someone's character disguised as conversation." Reporters rushed to record his statement. Jasmine did not speak until the very end, and when she did not read from prepared notes. "I have seen what happens when you stay silent, when you brush things off, when you try to rise above it all. People think they can keep crossing lines. But words carry weight. This lawsuit is not only about me. It is about every black woman who has ever felt she had to make herself smaller to belong in spaces she worked hard to earn." When she finished speaking, the crowd was completely silent. Inside Karoline's camp, panic was building. What began as spin control had turned into full-scale damage management. Sponsors were reaching out. Contracts were put on hold. A major media company even dropped a deal with her for a new documentary series, only days before filming was scheduled to start. Her email inbox became quiet. Her phone stopped ringing. Even her longtime agent, who had once called her the future face of conservative media, quietly stepped away. Karoline, still determined, recorded a video from her home in New Hampshire. She offered no apology. Instead, she stood her ground. "This is a witch hunt. It is cancel culture taken to the extreme. I meant what I said, and I will not retract it just to satisfy an outraged crowd." But the more she pushed back, the worse her situation became. Former interns started speaking out. Anonymous insiders leaked emails showing that Karoline frequently promoted deliberate provocation when dealing with progressive women of color. It was not an accident. It was a strategy, a decision. Meanwhile, Jasmine went back to her work on Capitol Hill, though nothing out of the ordinary had taken place. She held town hall meetings, voted on legislation, and met with voters. She made it a point to stay visible and grounded, demonstrating to the public that she was not hiding behind a legal fight, but continuing her duties. Still, it was not without difficulty. Samira noticed it late one evening after a long meeting. Jasmine was sitting in her office, staring at her phone, her thumb hovering over a message. "Are you okay?" Samira asked. Jasmine nodded, but the silence lingered between them. "You can admit you are exhausted," Samira said. "I am not exhausted," Jasmine whispered back. "I am calculating. Every choice matters now." The pressure was intense. Her inbox was full of messages from people thanking her, but also from those accusing her of playing the race card, manipulating the system, and being divisive. But she refused to engage with any of it. She knew that the courtroom would be where she answered back. Brandon worked on the case with precise focus. Depositions were arranged. Witnesses were prepared. One producer from the live panel agreed to testify, saying the remarks had been unscripted and unexpected, and that the atmosphere shifted the instant those words were spoken. "I have been doing this for 20 years, the producer said, "and I have never witnessed anything have an impact like that." Legal experts began offering their views. The hosts of The View talked about it. LegalZoom wrote blog posts about it. A CNN legal analyst said, "It is rare to see a defamation case in the public eye that is this straightforward. The background, the timing, the repeated behavior, it is all clearly documented. Yet, despite the strong case, there remained real Risks if Jasmine lost the backlash was expected to be fierce. She would be portrayed as the symbol of fake outrage and mocked for chasing money. Her critics would claim she had tried to use identity politics as a weapon and failed. But pressure does not always crush a person. Sometimes it makes them sharper, and Jasmine was sharper than ever. The day after the lawsuit hit the news, Karoline Leavitt lost a speaking slot at a university in Kansas. The official statement blamed scheduling conflicts, but people close to the matter knew the real reason. The administration did not want protest signs filling their auditorium. Then, a week later, two of Karoline's podcast sponsors, both wellness brands with huge online audiences, cut ties quietly. No public statements, just gone. But Karoline did not panic, at least not yet. She went live on her own platform, wearing a navy blazer, hair carefully styled, sitting in front of her trademark American flag background. Her voice was even and strong. "They want to silence me. That is what this is. It is political warfare, pretending to be a lawsuit." The video attracted views. Her supporters loved it. But outside of her loyal audience, people were not convinced. The problem was not just the lawsuit, it was the evidence. Old screenshots came back. Interviews resurfaced. Uncut transcripts of things she had said in the past suddenly looked far worse when placed under a stronger spotlight. Even media outlets that usually leaned conservative started to pull back. One host from a national news network had planned a segment defending Karoline, but after his producers reviewed the footage from the panel again, he canceled it and told his team, "We are not touching that, not with her history." Karoline's closest circle began to shrink. Her public relations manager stepped away indefinitely. A longtime friend stopped answering her calls. The silence was not loud, but its meaning was clear. She still had some loyal followers online, voices repeating her arguments, but their reach was fading. Sponsors do not put money into controversy. They put money into trust. And Karoline was losing that trust quickly. Then came the email leak. Someone from her old campaign team sent journalists screenshots of internal discussions, strategy notes that encouraged Karoline to interrupt liberal women of color mid-sentence to throw them off balance. It was not illegal, but it looked bad. It was planned, intentional, and it matched exactly what Jasmine had claimed in court. Suddenly, people who had stood behind Karoline began glancing over their shoulders. One Republican consultant said off the record, "She is becoming toxic." This is not just a public relations problem. It is a problem of values. Meanwhile, Jasmine kept working steadily. She did not boast. She did not attack Karoline on social media. She did not have to. Her quiet approach made the noise surrounding Karoline even louder. Brandon, her attorney, advised her to stay steady. "The public is watching. Keep your composure." And she did, until a Saturday morning interview shifted everything. Karoline appeared on a fringe digital news show, smiling and laughing, trying to appear unbothered. But then the host said, "A lot of people feel like you were just saying what everyone thinks, especially about Jasmine Crockett. Let us be honest, people are tired of the race narrative." Karoline did not correct him. Instead, she leaned back and laughed. "Well, I mean, I will not say you were wrong." That 10-second clip spread rapidly by that night. And this time, it was not only political fallout, it was deeply personal. Jasmine's team was overwhelmed with calls, some angry, but many filled with support from teachers, veterans, single mothers, and past congressional staffers. People were tired of hearing that their identity was just a narrative. Samira printed out the transcript and set it on Jasmine's desk. "She is unraveling," Samira said. Jasmine barely looked at the page. She already fell. Now she is just kicking up dust. Yet the legal process kept moving forward. Karoline's lawyers tried to dismiss the lawsuit, arguing it was an attack on her right to free speech. But the judge rejected that claim. The trial date was officially set, and behind the scenes, more people began switching sides. A former assistant quietly reached out to Brandon's office, offering to testify about the planned tactics Karoline used during her media appearances. Another person, an intern who once helped prepare Karoline's notes for panel discussions, handed over documents showing that she had pre-written barbs ready to use if certain topics came up. In other words, none of it was spontaneous. It was all planned. And that changed everything. By the close of the month, Karoline's name disappeared from the speaker list of a major conservative conference. One of her book publishers ended contract talks. Her brand was collapsing, not because Jasmine destroyed it, but because it had never truly had a strong foundation. Yet the public was still watching, and Jasmine was far from finished speaking. Her voice was growing stronger, and her message was reaching places Karoline never could. People were no longer whispering. They were talking openly in meetings, in classrooms, on front porches, and in barbershops. And the more they spoke, the more it became clear this was no longer about one remark or even one woman. It had become a reflection for everyone, held up against the wider conversation about race, respect, and public behavior in America. In Phoenix, a city council meeting that had nothing to do with the lawsuit began with the speaker mentioning Jasmine's case. In Nashville, a group of middle school students wrote essays for a Black History Month assignment, focused on leadership, and nearly half of them chose Jasmine Crockett as their topic. The moment had become a movement. Cable news tried to keep pace. Every discussion panel had something to add. But what caught people off guard? SUES began to change their views. Voices that had once been neutral or leaned conservative started admitting that Karoline's repeated behavior had gone too far, not because it was popular to say so, but because they were seeing things differently through the eyes of their daughters, their students, or their colleagues. She did not even flinch when it happened, one commentator said during a live panel. That is what struck me. Jasmine did not raise her voice. She did not perform for the camera. She carried the weight of the moment and stayed still. That stillness, people kept returning to it. It turned into a symbol, a snapshot that seemed to say, I have experienced this before, but I will not accept it anymore. Civil rights groups began hosting town halls, not protests, but discussions. A college in Oregon organized a roundtable called Respect in Public Discourse. Beyond the surface, Jasmine did not attend, but her name came up over 30 times during the event. And when the moderator asked, "What does strong leadership look like?" a young student answered, "It looks like knowing when to speak, and when not to give nonsense any attention." Meanwhile, Karoline's reputation kept deteriorating. A viral post from a former roommate described Karoline as someone who treated arguments like a game and often used people's identities as weapons rather than topics of discussion. Another former colleague shared a story about a media coaching session where Karoline practiced cutting off opponents, especially women of color, to throw them off balance. It was no longer just rumors, it became a chorus of voices. Karoline's supporters grew fewer. A handful stayed vocal online, but the momentum had shifted. The lawsuit had stopped being just a political maneuver. It was now personal, concrete. It meant something real. Back in Dallas, Jasmine kept to her schedule. She held meetings, visited schools, and went to community fundraisers. But she sensed the change to a small community event in Garland. An older woman approached her and handed her a plastic bag with a pair of earrings inside. "My mother gave me these when I turned 30, she said. "She told me they were for speaking your truth. You wear them now." Jasmine tried to give them back, but the woman shook her head. "Do not return them. Just pass them forward when it is time." That kind of response meant more than any retweets or headlines. The quiet gestures, the genuine ones, were what truly mattered. Brandon noticed it too. He pulled Jasmine aside after a morning strategy session. "Do you know what people are seeing now?" he asked her. "They see someone who refused to let that insult be the end of the story." Jasmine looked at him. "It was never the insult that worried me. It was the pattern." And she was right. The strength of the case was not only about what Karoline had said, but about the environment that kept letting her say it over and over without facing consequences. Now that silence was breaking, teachers in public schools began mentioning the case during training sessions about language and inclusion. A nonprofit in Minneapolis named Jasmine Woman of the Year for standing up against a culture of silent endurance with determined courage. And even though Jasmine did not go on talk shows or do media tours, her words still traveled. At a youth summit in Tulsa, she gave a short speech that later went viral online. She said, I did not file this lawsuit to become famous. I did it because sometimes you have to say enough pretending that some lines are not real, enough acting like we are too delicate to demand respect. I did not want fame. I wanted standards. But while Jasmine's words were inspiring people, Karoline was sinking further, and her next move would only deepen the trouble. There was a kind of stillness that settled in once the cameras disappeared, not a peaceful stillness, but a heavy one. Jasmine felt it most in the quiet of the night when the house was still, and she was not Congresswoman Crockett on the house floor or the face in viral videos, just Jasmine, a daughter, a woman alone with her own thoughts. She did not cry, but she had not really been sleeping either. The fight was necessary, but that did not make it any less exhausting. Her father called her that son. Leroy Crockett had seen plenty of battles himself. He marched in the 1970s, was arrested in Baton Rouge during a sit-in. His voice was rough now, slower than before, but it still carried weight and honesty. "You holding up, baby?" he asked. "I am all right," she said. "You sure?" he pressed. "No," she admitted. "But I am still standing." He let out a quiet laugh. "That is what we do, we stand." There was a brief pause before he said something she had not expected. "You remind me of your grandmother." That made her pause. "Why?" she asked. "Because she never raised her voice either. But when she looked at you, you knew exactly where she stood. Same eyes you have now." Jasmine swallowed hard. She did not answer, but she held on to those words. The lawsuit, the public scrutiny, the endless commentary, it was all a storm. But she was no stranger to storms, and what she kept reminding herself was that it was no longer just her own name at stake. It was the burden carried by every woman who had ever been told to stay silent, to stay polite, to step aside. That was the thought that stopped her from giving in to exhaustion. Samira was the only one who saw her in those in-between times, the late-night strategy sessions, the spoon frozen halfway to her mouth when another call came in, the quiet moments after reading yet another anonymous email accusing her of being too loud for someone who did not belong. One night, Samira asked, "Do you ever think about just leaving all of this behind?" Jasmine looked right at her. "Every day." "Then I remember who is watching." The team had become closer, more protective. Brandon started handling press statements with extra care, aware of how fast things could be twisted. Jasmine's phone was hardly ever out of reach. Every message, every headline, every email could become another trap. Yet, there were moments that brought light too. A college student in Oakland sent her a handmade card. Just construction paper, glitter, and a simple note. "You look like someone I want to be when I grow up. Please do not stop." Jasmine kept that card tucked safely in her wallet. Meanwhile, Karoline was coming apart, even if she never said so directly. Inside her house in Connecticut, she was snapping at her assistants. She did not trust her new PR advisor, who kept suggesting she go quiet for a few weeks. She started arguing more often with her fiancé, accusing him of failing to publicly stand by her. He shot back, "What am I supposed to say? That people misunderstood you? They did not." The walls were closing in. She gave another podcast interview, and this time, her voice shook ever so slightly. "I just think this is all blown out of proportion. I mean, if we are going to sue people over opinions, what is next?" But no one was buying the opinion excuse anymore, because it was not simply about opinions. It was about patterns. It was about intention. It was about harm. And Jasmine's legal team was strengthening their case every day. Another former employee came forward, offering a voice recording of a meeting where Karoline laughed while reading hateful mail sent to black female politicians. She had called it free content. This was no longer just a lawsuit. It was turning into an examination of character, and Karoline was failing. But Jasmine kept her focus. She spent countless hours reviewing statements, preparing with Brandon, making sure that every single word she had ever spoken publicly about the case could stand on its own. No slip-ups, no contradictions. She knew how quickly they would pounce if she made even the smallest mistake. "I did not come this far just to fall over a cracked sidewalk," she said during one prep session. Brandon smiled. "You won't. You walk like someone who has been watching the ground her whole life." But while Jasmine kept her step steady, Karoline was about to make one misstep too many. And this time, even her few remaining supporters would not follow. She still had a small group backing her mostly loud voices online. They cheered when she appeared on fringe news outlets, posting clips of her interviews with hashtags like truthteller and hashtag free speech under fire. But inside Karoline Leavitt's own world, things were falling apart faster than she could fix them. It was a Wednesday afternoon when she made one last real attempt to fight back. She went live on her personal channel, raw and unfiltered, without a network or any PR edits. It was just Karoline, sitting in her home office, hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes, her voice sharp. "I am done being polite," she said. "I am done letting the left twist this into something it is not. I did not attack Jasmine Crockett. I challenged her. I confronted hypocrisy, and now am being sued for saying what every American should be able to say. Without fear." She paused, taking a sip from a mug carefully positioned on camera, decorated with an American flag. "She is not hurt. She is performing. This is about silencing dissent. They want people like me erased, canceled. But I am not going anywhere." Comments poured in quickly, some supportive, others harsh. Screenshots flooded Twitter within the hour. But now, the backlash was not only from critics. Her last remaining agent officially ended their contract 30 minutes after her stream finished. A political action committee that had previously raised funds for her possible Senate run removed her name from their roster. A former campaign manager publicly condemned her remarks, calling the lawsuit a long overdue response to behavior that had gone unchecked for far too long. That one hit hard. Karoline had trusted him, confided in him about her long-term plan to be the storm that shakes the system. Now, he was saying she had become the system itself, a spokesperson for disrespect in a blazer. But what really shattered her momentum was what happened that Friday during a live-streamed interview with a lesser-known YouTube host. Karoline let something slip. "I mean," she said, waving her hand, "Jasmine's whole image is being a victim. That is her entire angle. I poke at her a bit, and now I am in court. Please." The host chuckled. Karoline smirked. And that was it. A young staffer on Jasmine's legal team snipped the quote and sent it to Brandon. He did not reply right away. Instead, he picked up the phone, called a legal analyst he trusted, and asked, "Are you watching this?" The answer came instantly, "Oh yes. That is the final nail." The clip went viral within hours. But this time, something different occurred. A well-known conservative columnist wrote a fierce piece titled, "When Being Right Means Knowing When to Stop Talking." In it, she broke down Karoline's refusal to accept responsibility not only for the remark, but for the culture she had helped build. The writer explained, "There comes a point when stubbornness turns into self-sabotage." Karoline had crossed that point weeks before. Even prominent conservative donors started quietly reaching out to Jasmine's office not to apologize, but to distance themselves, saying, "We understand what this really is now. We do not want our names linked to it." And amid all of this, Karoline began to feel a new kind of silence, not from trolls online or bots on Twitter, but from the people who were actually in her life. Friends who stopped replying to messages, family members suggesting she should sit things out for a while, a cousin who blocked her on Facebook. For someone whose life revolved around visibility, becoming invisible felt like torture. She started questioning everything: her publicist, her media team, her usual tactics. Nothing seemed to work. She could not fix it. She could not shape the story anymore. The media had stopped seeking her quotes. TV bookers were ignoring emails. She was no longer a rising figure in politics. She had become a warning story. Meanwhile, Jasmine had stayed silent for almost a week. No interviews, no appearances, no public comments. But that silence carried more weight than any press event. People were quoting her past speeches, replaying her early congressional testimony, and revisiting her legal work. She did not have to appear in person to remind people who she was. Karoline had tried to drag her name through the mud, yet Jasmine came out looking clearer than ever. But while Karoline was falling apart on her own, Jasmine was getting ready for the moment that would bring it all into focus, the speech that would secure her place not only in headlines, but in history. The auditorium at Spelman College was full. Every seat was taken. People stood along the walls: students, professors, community leaders. Jasmine had not spoken publicly in weeks. Her team had turned away dozens of media requests, skipped major interviews, and stayed clear of the online chatter. But when Spellman extended the invitation, she did not hesitate. "This one matters," she told Samira. The event was not directly about the lawsuit. It was part of a broader campus series about leadership and civic duty. But everyone there knew why they had come. They arrived early, brought notebooks, leaned forward in their chairs. They were not there just to listen to a politician. They were waiting for Jasmine. She stepped onto the stage in a charcoal gray pantsuit, simple. No flashy details, just presence. The applause was strong, but not chaotic. It felt respectful, deserved. She approached the podium, glanced across the crowd, and adjusted the microphone. Her opening words were gentle. "When I was a little girl, I used to be scared of microphones." A ripple of laughter eased the tension. Jasmine smiled. "Not because I did not have something to say," she went on, "but because I was never sure people would hear me the right way." She explained she learned early that sometimes it is not about what you say, but about who people believe is speaking. Now, the room fell completely quiet. She did not mention Karoline even once. She did not have to. Instead, she spoke about the layered experience of being both black and female in politics, about expectations, about tone, about how silence can be mistaken for weakness and composure confused with agreement. "It is not my responsibility to make people comfortable with truth," she said. "It is my job to say it even when it feels risky." The audience erupted. Students jumped up, some holding their phones high, recording every second. Jasmine kept going, speaking about dignity, about setting limits, about refusing to laugh at things that were not funny just to keep a room calm. You can be civil and still confront. You can be gracious and still demand more. These are not opposites. They are tools. You just have to know when to use which one. People were not just listening, they were engaging. Heads nodded, fingers snapped. Tears welled in the eyes of some older faculty members who had waited years for someone to say these words in that stage. Samira watched from the wings, arms folded, eyes fixed, hardly blinking. Brandon was there as well. He did not take notes. He did not check his phone. He simply listened. Because at that point, this was no longer about strategy. It was about substance. After Jasmine finished, a cue and a session followed. A student, likely no older than 19, asked a question that changed the feeling in the room. "How do you stay calm when people try to reduce you to a stereotype in real time?" Jasmine paused for a moment. "Because I know I am not what they say I am. And the second I react just to prove it, I give them the power. I do not perform for disrespect. I correct it with purpose." That line was clipped and shared online even before she had left the stage. Within hours, it was reposted by journalists, celebrities, and even some unexpected names, people who had once stayed silent, but now felt compelled to speak out. CNN aired her entire speech that evening. MSNBC highlighted key moments. A quote from her talk appeared on the Library of Congress's official Instagram page. Someone even launched an art project on TikTok painting Jasmine's portrait in oils, while her voice from the speech played in the background. But it was not just viral. It felt like proof. For the first time in weeks, Jasmine finally slept through the night. She did not wake up wondering what headline awaited her. She did not worry about how to spin things. Because she had not defended who she was, she had defined it. And even people who had stayed neutral before were now starting to understand the bigger picture. This was not simply an argument between two political figures. It was not a lawsuit staged for attention. It was a fight over the line that separates criticism from disrespect. Karoline had decided to question Jasmine's place. Jasmine had decided to challenge the belief that was supposed to justify it. But just as the public was beginning to see things clearly, a final step was being prepared quietly behind the scenes, one that would resolve the case without ever going to court. It unfolded faster than anyone imagined. A full trial was set for the following month in Harris County, and jury selection was already in progress. Jasmine's legal team had studied every detail, ready for the long process ahead. But on a rainy Thursday morning, just 3 weeks before the trial was to start, Brandon's phone lit up with a call from Karoline Leavitt's new lawyer, They wanted to settle. No public trial, no cameras, no big headlines, just private paperwork, NDAs, and a number. Brandon stayed silent for a moment, then told them to send it in writing. 2 hours later, the offer arrived. 8 figures. No statement of wrongdoing, but a complete financial settlement, along with an agreement that Karoline would step away from all public roles for at least 24 months. No new podcast, no interviews, no television spots. Silence. When Brandon showed Jasmine the details, she looked at him without blinking. She is not apologizing, no, he said, but she is disappearing. Jasmine did not reply right away. She walked to the window of her office and watched the early evening rain streaming down the glass. Samira sat quietly across from her, arms folded. After a full minute, Jasmine turned. We are not doing this for the money. If I sign this, it is to move forward, not to give her an easy way out. Brandon nodded. She does not get an easy way out. She is finished. And he was right. Within 48 hours, the deal was signed, and the terms were sealed. Karoline put out a short statement through her lawyer, saying she was choosing to focus on her personal life and stepping back from political media to reflect. There was no follow-up interview, no live broadcast, no angry statement. For someone who had once built her career in front of cameras, the silence felt like she had vanished, but Jasmine's silence had been stronger, and now it was final. The media responded in different ways. Some outlets praised the closure, while others wished the case had gone to trial. But the people who mattered, those who had watched the case from the start, knew exactly what had just happened. The woman who had built her reputation on provocation had finally run out of excuses and people to blame. And Jasmine? She did not throw a party. She did not post a video declaring victory. She kept to her usual schedule: town halls, committee work, school visits. But there was a lighter feeling in her posture, a change that people could sense. One night, during a speech at a community center in Waco, someone asked her how she felt about how it ended. She smiled, not smug, not boastful, just steady. I did not need a courtroom to prove my value. I needed the world to see that boundaries still exist, and that crossing them comes at a price. A few people started clapping, which grew into a standing ovation. And outside that building, something shifted. People began using her name as an example, not only in politics, but in everyday life. Parents encouraged their daughters, speak like Jasmine. Teachers reminded their students, lead like Jasmine. Local councils quoted her in resolutions about respect and accountability. She had not just won a media battle, she had claimed a cultural moment. And most importantly, she had stayed true to herself through it all. As for Karoline, she vanished from television screens. Sponsors did not return. Her podcast feed went quiet. Her name stopped trending. The public did not forget her, but they moved forward without her. Because this had never been about destroying someone. It was about showing what it looks like to rise. Not loudly, not with spectacle, but with steadiness, determination, and clarity. Now, the only thing left was to keep moving forward and show the world that silence does not mean giving up. Sometimes it shows strength. This was never only about two women sitting on opposite sides of a political panel. It was not about a viral video, who got canceled, or who walked away with money. If that was all people noticed, then they missed the bigger point completely. This was about what happens when someone finally decides to say no more. For years, women like Jasmine Crockett were told to let things slide, laugh it off, take the higher path, because the other option, the fight, was seen as too messy, too loud, too risky. But people misunderstood silence. It was not agreement. It was not weakness. It was survival until it turned into resistance. The truth is, not every fight is won in a courtroom, and not every victory comes with noise. Sometimes, the quiet shift is what truly matters most, the moment when someone decides to hold the line, not only for themselves, but for everyone watching. Jasmine's story reached people who never paid much attention to politics: mothers who had been passed over at work, students mocked for speaking up, professionals ignored, talked over, or dismissed. Her victory was not about the money or the news coverage. It was in the reflection she offered people. She held up a mirror and made them ask themselves, what am I putting up with? What am I excusing as just words when it is really an attack? It reminded people that words have weight, tone has power, and silence, when used with purpose, can speak louder than any shout. Karoline Leavitt did not disappear because someone destroyed her. She disappeared because she never realized that the rules had changed. She thought outrage was a game she could win. But this was never just outrage. This was about consequences. And that is what stays with people. Because Jasmine did not throw insults. She stood her ground and forced the country to look at itself, whether it wanted to or not. Brandon once said, "The court of public opinion is unpredictable." But this time, it was not. People saw what went on, they felt it, and they decided they had seen enough. In a world that pushes us to choose sides fast, where social media turns pain into content, Jasmine showed what it means to move with purpose and dignity. She showed us that you do not have to scream to be heard. You do not have to burn every bridge to demand accountability. You just need to stay firm long enough for the truth to catch up. And when it does not need a spotlight. It carries its own light. So if you are watching this and wondering what to do when someone tries to reduce you, silence you, or twist who you are, remember this story. Remember Jasmine's calm, her focus, her choice to pick clarity instead of chaos. And then ask yourself, where do I need to draw the line? Because once you draw it, the world begins to adjust around it. If this story made you pause, think, or feel seen, do not keep that feeling to yourself. Share it, talk about it, use it, and if you have not already, subscribe for more stories that tell the truth without shouting, and remind us what real strength looks like.